I'm not ignoring you. I'm just busy. Send.
Those were the first words that Angelica ever said to me. Well, typed to me. Fast forward to today, 8 years later, and we now run a successful data and analytics company together. We stepped into the hornet's nest called entrepreneurship during a time where what we do, data, promises to change the industry as we know it.
So how in the world did we go from that, two people who sat 6 feet apart from each other but hardly spoke, to becoming best friends and co-founders of a business, eventually up and leaving our secure jobs with no plan B and no clients in the pipeline? And to top it off, we're young, we're women, and we're data geeks. Not what most people envision when they think of an entrepreneur. So were we crazy or courageous?
Anybody who knows us can tell you that Angelica and I could not be more different. She's not really much one for social interaction.
Stefany, on the other hand, couldn't turn down a conversation if her life depended on it.
I suppose in animal terms, I'm much more like a dog. I love everybody, and I have a lot to tell you, even though you've only been gone for 2 minutes. Angelica, on the other hand, is more like a cat. Don't approach her. She'll approach you. Maybe.
It's true, I'm very structured and succinct, and Stefany's more the creative type. But thanks to her conversational persistence, we became fast friends. Our backgrounds turned out to be very complementary. A blending of finance and statistics was perfect for working with healthcare data. We ended up traveling the healthcare circuit together, working for some of the state's largest healthcare organizations, and working with a mind-boggling number of different data systems.
Everywhere that we went as employees, the story was the same. No matter how many data systems that people had, or how big their analytics department was and how busy, they still felt starved for insights. What they needed was a data navigator. A data navigator can chop through the noise of all of the data and all of the systems and distill the information to the most meaningful and the most actionable. That's what Angelica and I naturally did as employees. Now, we didn't know it at the time, but we were actually in a pressure cooker. It turns out we were already serving as intrapreneurs. That's an employee within an organization who advocates for change and innovation. But all it took was the right hint of rebellion and passion to push us into full-on entrepreneurship.
I told Stefany about my idea for this business, and at first she thought I was joking, and then she thought I was crazy, but then got excited. And our excited talks turned into services, and the services turned into a business name, and the business name became an LLC. And 8 months later, after planning every single detail, none of which equipped us for entrepreneurship, I finally said, enough planning. If we don't do this now, there will always be a reason not to.
And that's how the most fiscally responsible person that I know convinced me to quit our job with no clients yet in the pipeline and no plan B. Now, today, we're 2 years into our lifelong mission to make data a universal language in one of the most complex industries that exists, healthcare.
I wish we could stand here today and say it's been all rainbows and unicorns, but it hasn't. Entrepreneurship is hard, and it has challenged our grit.
Now, we've definitely had our fair share of amazing champions, but we've also had our fair share of people who sat back in the wings, betting on if we were going to sink or swim. In a lot of cases, we were very surprised, and in some cases very disappointed, to learn who fell into which bucket at the end of the day. We also learned along the way that people had some very interesting, and in some cases downright candid, ideas of what a healthcare analytics consultant who's headquartered in Albuquerque, New Mexico, should look like or should sound like. Some of our favorite quotes include, How can you call yourself a subject matter expert when you don't have any gray hair on your head? Wow, I wasn't expecting you guys to be so advanced. And where did you guys come from? You learned all of this here in New Mexico?
And don't forget about all the people who conversationally inquire about our age. And you might be wondering, it doesn't matter, we know what we're doing.
It became very apparent very quickly, whether people said it or not, that some people are just going to think that we are too young to run a business or to tell them anything new about theirs. Or perhaps too female to be in data technology. Or perhaps too local to know anything about anything, let alone to do it very well.
These will continue to be difficult challenges for us. We're different. But the bigger realization is that this doesn't just affect us. When we focus too much on how others are different, we lose sight of why those differences are gifts. These gifts are what healthcare needs because they've created a unique view and perspective that others have of the world. So where do we find this? Startups, small businesses, young companies, diverse entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who at first glance might seem too passionate or too idealistic when you first meet. People driven by a personal mission. But they may not look like today's healthcare leaders. They may come from a different country, or a different generation, or even a different industry.
And yet, the data suggests that these underrepresented voices are not where the investment is occurring. But why not? If somebody asked you what differences made you think you could get up and change healthcare, what would you say?
I'd say the differences that have shaped me are part of my unique story. And if I were to be asked questions like, what's shaped who you are and what gives you the courage to wake up day after day to continue to push that boulder up a hill until someone listens, I'd say I've been doing that my whole life. Born to a Mexican immigrant, I'm a first-generation American. I grew up with alcoholism, domestic violence, and homelessness. And while I wouldn't wish those experiences on anyone, they've made me resilient beyond measure.
I might say that even though I was programming computers at 12, I was dropping out of high school at 16. My mom cleaned hotel rooms for 20 years, and we weren't exactly the type of family that saved for college. But yet, these underrepresented voices, again, are not where the investment is occurring and why. Healthcare is very partial to other people who have been in healthcare for multiple decades. Healthcare often encourages competition over collaboration. Passionate voices can easily grow very tired. But perhaps worst of all, healthcare just accepts this to be true.
But healthcare is changing. Our ecosystem is getting bigger and bigger, and there are more and more players who know things that we don't. So how do we get the benefit of more voices and diverse perspectives and new skill sets? Well, we can start by listening to what new and young companies have to say.
We can also demand a culture that celebrates these perspectives rather than simply accept a culture that's okay with what has always been. Much like Angelica and I didn't talk, but we had to collaborate to do great things, we're all going to have to do that. Angelica and I have actually single-handedly fostered collaboration and knowledge sharing between huge state agencies that we never thought would exist and had been historically very adversarial. By serving as trusted data stewards and trusted intermediaries, we've been able to build bridges that we never thought we would live to see. Now, if one small company like ours can do that on this scale here, imagine what would happen if we all thought like that.
You hold the power in your hands as patients, as leaders, and as intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs. You can demand more. You can champion change. But the first step is awareness. Ask yourself, what insights or perspectives might I be dismissing because of my own blinders? We urge you to invite people like us to the table, to hear what we have to say with an open mind. It's not just our future that depends on it. The future of healthcare depends on it.